up, fuzzball.
From Down Under.
Do or do not. There is no try.
G'day, mate. How you going? G'day, mate. How you going? This is Adam O'Brien, the Fantha from Down Under, coming to you live from Quinlan's Cantina on the Gold Coast of Australia. Here for another episode of Star Wars Chat. That's right, Aussie style. Well, we've got some exciting stuff if you're into role-playing today. That's right, role-playing games. I've been playing those for years. Yep, I did West End games back in the day, back in the 90s when we were in the dark times of Star Wars. That's right, that's when there was no content coming out until we had, of course, those great novels from Timothy Zahn, of course, Michael Stackpole and Kevin J. Anderson. And we had these amazing West End D6 games, and that started my love of role-playing games, and of course D&D and many other things. But tonight we've got Ian, that's GM Hooley himself from Dicepool podcast, who's going to be coming on the show today to chat about his love of Star Wars gaming, and just role-playing games in general, plus tell us about his podcast, the team that he's got over there. And I'll tell you what, if you're a role-playing games fan like myself, you've got to go and check it out because it is an amazing podcast. Tells you about the Fantasy Flight Games systems and, of course, a lot of their products. He's even working on some of the different products they've got over there at Fantasy Flight Games. So it's very exciting to really get into the narrative dice system that Fantasy Flight Games has got over there. And Ian's here today to talk all about it. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Here on the Fantha from Down Under. Welcome to Fantha Tracks, the Fantha from Down Under. I'm your host, Adam O'Brien, and joining me live from Brisbane in Queensland is a host of the Dicepool podcast. It is an RPG podcast, and if you're into Star Wars RPG or anything Fantasy Flight, this is going to be the place to go and check out, especially for a podcast. Joining me is GM Hooley, or better known as Ian Houlihan. Mate, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, Adam. How are you?
Really good, and excited to be chatting about RPGs and Star Wars, two of my favourite things, mate. So, anyway, but how you been?
I've been very, very well, very, very busy. I'm now also doing a little bit of freelance work for Fantasy Flight Games as well. So, yes, that keeps me very busy, as well as my normal day job, and obviously doing the podcast as well. So, yeah.
That's a very exciting thing to be happening too, to be able to do work in amongst Fantasy Flight's current amazing titles. So congratulations.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of work on Legend of the Five Rings. So if any of the listeners are into sort of samurai films and things like that, that's pretty much what Legend of the Five Rings is. It's kind of like, I guess, Dungeons and Dragons or Game of Thrones, but set in feudal Japan. So, yes, it's very, very different.
That's awesome. So, cool. It being a Star Wars show, we have to ask you about your Star Wars fandom. So, when did you first watch the original Star Wars?
I watched the original Star Wars New Hope, before it was called A New Hope, in the cinema in the Toombul Shopping Centre, the old one where you have to climb up all these stairs, back in 1977. So I was there for the original release. Sure, I was only 6, but that's okay. Sort of fell in love with it. My dad really pushed the whole sci-fi. He was a huge sci-fi fan, and he really pushed me into that sort of realm. Took me and my best mate to see A New Hope, and we absolutely fell in love with it. And it's kind of become a little bit of a lifelong obsession for me then. Playing all the role-playing games and collecting all the Star Wars stuff when I was a kid. That's kind of my obsession and where it came from.
Yeah, and you've mentioned off air that you got into the D6 West End games, Star Wars, which I did as well. Did you enjoy that system and enjoy getting in and playing both, characters and also doing GM and that?
Well, look, when it first came out back in 1987, there was, we call it, as you would know, we Star Wars fans call it the dark times, because there just wasn't a lot that came out after 1983, after Return of the Jedi. And so suddenly I mean, I'd been playing D&D since about 1984 to sort of fill this void that was left by no Star Wars. And then suddenly this announcement came that Star Wars was going to be coming out in a role-playing game system. So I'd never GM'd before. I'd only ever played. So I thought it was high time that I do that. And I was so immersed in the Star Wars culture that I felt that it would be a good place for me to start. So I got into the D6, played that for many, many years, and absolutely loved that system. There was nothing that you could not do with that system. So, yeah, absolutely loved it. And then obviously went through all the other editions. Almost missed out on Fantasy Flight Games version because I'd obviously been through all these other systems. I think I had system burnout. Then during PAX, in the first PAX, I was down in Melbourne and went into a game shop and picked up the Edge of the Empire book and thought, oh, it's got Star Wars written on it, I've got to buy it. So even though I had no intention at that time to play it, and then I started to read it and really fell in love with the narrative dice system. And then showed it to a few friends and listened to the Order 66 podcast, which is on the same podcast network as the Dicepool podcast is on. Learned everything that I could possibly learn about it, absorbed it, and then started to run it. And then, just absolutely fell in love with this system to the point that I don't like other systems. Except for Legend of the Five Rings, because I now write for it, so I've got to love it. But no, it's and I mean that's from Star Wars, from Edge of the Empire. They've then developed Genesis. So Fantasy Flight Games has developed the Genesis role-playing game, which is that uses the same narrative dice mechanic as Star Wars does and Edge of the Empire. But just in any sort of fantasy, any sort of sci-fi, any sort of setting that you want to design of your own to bring people to the table to play in unique settings. Or, I've heard of people, actually I'm helping design it, is a Ghostbusters version of Genesis.
Oh, wow.
You can pretty much do anything. You've got to put a little bit of work into it, but, if you've got a good bunch of people around the table who really want to get into a certain genre, whether it be, horror or aliens or even Star Wars, why not use Genesis to make that a reality?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. And look, I'm fairly new to Genesis, as my crowd that we play with, as I've said off air, uses primarily Edge of the Empire. That's the main game that we've been playing because we just love that scoundrel and smuggler sort of universe of Star Wars. I've never been big into the Jedi and Sith because the thing is they're superheroes. And no matter what you throw them into, they're going to be superheroes, So it's going to be, smugglers doing an operation, and all of a sudden Jedi comes in, whooshka, takes out what he's going to take out, takes off. And then it's not much of a game, like for myself anyway. Whereas you got to use a team, and that team has to work together to pull off a job, get the resources to pay for the ship, to pay for the fuel, the hyperdrive fixed up, all that sort of stuff. And that's just the story. The story of those games is fantastic. The GMs can have a lot of fun, and the narrative dice system pushes the power back into the players as well as far as narrative. The dice system is the greatest system I've played, and I've played a lot of them. I think one of the things is I've really enjoyed starting from, as a kid, I think it was the Choose Your Own Adventure books.
Yes.
It was those and Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego. I don't know if you remember that game.
I do indeed, yes.
Yeah. So it was the idea that you can manipulate a story yourself. You are the storyteller. And each time it evolved to a better system that I took on, as the thing that I would be entertained by. So it went from Choose Your Own Adventure then to fighting fantasy, which, I've read those for years. And I think that's with the thing in the late 80s. We just kept collecting those books, and then the books got bigger, and there was board game versions of them. Then D&D. And it just kept going. And we got stuck with one system for a little while because I think we liked a lot of the material more than the system. But Palladium books with Robotech and riffs and stuff like that. So we like that sort of cyber universe there for a little while, but once we got transitioned finally over to this narrative dice system, it is the most fun I've ever had played in years. And I'm currently playing that alongside the new D&D, and that's fun, but it gets bogged down in comparison to how quick, how we move through combat. Like, the combat in these systems is quick, and that's what I love about it.
Look, the one thing that I think that for people who've only ever experienced role-playing games in the form of Dungeons & Dragons, and I mean, that's an entry-level game. It's a lot more accessible than any other game which is out there. And, you know, credit to Wizards of the Coast for keeping that momentum going. And 5th edition is a very, very good version of D&D. And let's face it, there have been 4 other iterations of varying degrees of goodness. Is that a word? But the thing that most people would obviously realise with D&D is that when you play, the GM has a lot more input as to what's happened. Mm-hmm. So the players can say that they do certain things and they roll dice and they give the result, but it's all left up to the GM or the Dungeon Master to work out and explain to the players what's happened. In the narrative dice system, a lot more, as you said before, a lot more control is given over to the players to determine, okay, so sure, I may have missed, but something amazing has happened. Or, you know, yes, I've hit, but something really terrible has also gone on. So, you know, you telling this story collaboratively, building the narrative as you go. And it's just, you know, I can't speak more highly enough about this game. It's just really, really good. So, yeah, if you're a Star Wars fan, even you don't have to go and buy in Australia that's like over $100 for the core rulebook. You can go and buy the beginner box. There's 4 of them now. There's the Edge of the Empire one, there's the Age of Rebellion, there's the Force and Destiny, and then there's also the Force Awakens.
That's right.
So whichever, you know, genre you like, if you really like Jedi, go and do the Force and Destiny one. If you really like the, you know, fighting the rebellion against the Empire, you know, definitely Age of Rebellion. If you really like the solo sort of film or Rogue One or something like that, more so probably solo, you know, you'd be wanting to look at Edge of the Empire. So, but no, I can't speak highly enough about it. Everything that's in there, you've got dice and books and, yeah, that's all you need to start. It's a great Christmas present for kids too.
Oh, it is. I love the fact that it really has the actual material you would need. If you're a player character, you've got, not only do you get a mission or an adventure with it, you also get the core rules, the core weapons, some basic ships in there and stuff like that, plus pre-generated characters, which I think they're absolutely beautiful character sheets too, the way they've laid them out. Even though they're literally, you know, it's all made for you already. But the artwork, the layout. That's another thing that Fantasy Flight Games are kind of leading the path with is the graphic layout of their material is superior to most. I mean, I love D&D 5th edition's layout of the new books and stuff like that, but I think Fantasy Flight's got the edge here, I think.
Look, if you're looking for beauty within a game, you need to pick up Legend of the Five Rings. They have taken everything that they've learnt from Star Wars and all of the history and lore that comes with Legend of the Five Rings, because it used to be owned by AEG, which was Legend of the Five Rings started as a card game. Yeah. And as with all of that knowledge and playtesting that they've done previously, they've now presented this product, and it's gorgeous. There is no other way to describe it. The artwork is fantastic. It's very elegant in its design, it's also got a beginner's box set as well. So if you want to sort of dabble in, you can always go and take a look at that. God, it sounds like I work for FF Genius, doesn't it?
It does. But what I'm going to say is, obviously, one of the big things that you do for fans of role-play, fans of Star Wars, and now obviously Genesis as well, is your website is absolutely gobsmackingly amazing when it comes to information, stuff that can follow what you guys are doing as both players and GMs themselves, but also for information plus the podcast. So you've got things like obviously the Genesis resources page on your so this, folks, if you want to check it out while we're chatting, it is the dicepoolpodcast.com. And this is, I mean, first of all, it's gorgeous.
Thank you very much.
And coming from an ex-web designer and graphic artist, let me tell you, it's you guys have nailed it. But what I love is you've got enough information there for people that are new to Genesis. You can pretty much create your own characters. And they're actually beautiful layouts, mate, when it comes to the character sheets there too. Vehicle layouts. I mean, you guys have done a lot of work.
We have, but I mean, we've also got a lot of material from the community as well, and there are some amazing people who are out there who do. I don't know whether they do graphic design for a living, but they sure as hell should.
Yeah,
some of the stuff that they produce is just absolutely amazing, and we obviously get their permission to post it up there. But we want to showcase what the community's doing just as much as what, you know, the sort of stuff that we do. You know, we've designed our own setting. We did it live on the show in a thing which is called a setting roulette.
Yeah.
Each of us came up with this idea we came up with 3 ideas which we think would make for as elements of a great setting, and then randomly chose around the 4 of us one of those settings, and then we put together a setting live on the show. Then we developed that so that we had rules for it, and then we did 6 episodes of a live play using that setting to tell a story. Just so to give listeners the idea that it can go from just this nothing idea of a group of people around a table going, wouldn't it be cool if we do this game, all the way through to making it a reality. So, you know, we've taken it that next level, I guess, rather than just showing people how to play the game, we've taught them how to design it from the ground up for an exciting thing to play with friends. So, yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. So tell us about your team. Obviously, you've got 3 other GMs, I guess you call it. You've got GM Huz, GM Flano, that's awesome, very Aussie name, love it, and GM Caitlin. So tell us about your team and what they all specialise in. Okay,
so we've all got our own specialities. I mean, I'm probably fit the old-time gamer the most, since I'm the eldest out of all 4 of us. Caitlin, who is now in the States, she moved over there to be with her partner Chase, who's in the Navy over there. She's the newcomer, so hasn't been involved in gaming all that long, but she's picked it up very, very quickly, and she's run games now as well. So she brings sort of the deer in the spotlight sort of appeal to the show. So that we're rather than looking at a problem or an issue question that gets raised from the old timers' perspective, we get this brand new fresh blood to come in and talk about it on the show, and she's amazing. And then we've got Huz, who is probably the next eldest. Actually, I'm sure about that, come to think of it. But both Huz and Flano are around about the same sort of age, and they've got the same sort of experience. Flano is definitely more about, he's very much about storytelling. He's done a lot of Vampire the Masquerade and things like that. And he's our systems guy, so he knows the ins and outs of a lot of the mechanics of all of the systems that plug into Genesis, and give us a lot of feedback in relation to that. And then Huz, he is predominantly in miniatures. Well, that's where he got his start from, in the miniatures side of things with 40k and fantasy and things like that. But he's got probably just as much experience in the RPG realm as what I do. with various systems and whatever else, and also a bit of an artist at the same time. So yeah, but between the whole four of us, we have this really, I guess, eclectic mix of ages and experience that we can, nut out a problem, and we've got really good chemistry, and that's what a lot of the feedback that we get about the show is that we communicate really, really well. And I think if it shows nothing else, that especially when it comes to playing around at the table, that we have got that chemistry that we can just get straight into the storytelling and tell some epic stories. So, to give people an idea who would never ever, that this is their first time that they have ever stepped into role-playing game shoes, that, this is what it can be like. So, yeah, it's great.
It's amazing. So tell the folks about, how the podcast itself got going and what they can find on the episodes themselves. Obviously, you guys play the games and put some of those out live, I take it, so for some of those episodes. But, yeah, what can players themselves learn in these episodes too?
Sure. So the Dicepool podcast basically started when we were talking X number of times after gaming sessions, and we would just have these elongated, almost, I guess, gaming deep and meaningfuls, for want of a better term, around the table after the session. And we've just gone, wouldn't it be great if we recorded this instead of sort of just this information that we're sharing and learning and sort of improving our games, rather than just it being isolated to the table, perhaps we can bring that to the gaming community. So we sort of thought long and hard about what we wanted to do, and we were playing Star Wars at the time, Star Wars Age of the Empire. And, we knew that we loved the narrative dice system, but the problem was that there were so many other shows which are out there which were doing Age of the Empire stuff. And then Genesis got announced. And we've thought, why don't we do a show based on that system? Because we're familiar with it, but we've also got knowledge of all these other systems that we can then bring into the one. So that's where it was born from there. As far as the stuff that we discuss on the show, we normally take a topic and discuss that infinitum. We also have a bit of a Q&A at the end of the show, so listeners can send us in questions that they may have, and we'll answer them as best as we can. If we don't know what the answer is, we will go to the developers because we have a good relationship with Fantasy Flight Games. And then we present that obviously to the listeners. But what we did for the first few shows is we really took what would it be like if I was a brand new gamer who had never experienced role-playing before and had never experienced the narrative dice system before? How would I like to listen to a podcast to learn about the game, to sort of supplement the system? And so we've decided to, gradually take piece by piece. We did one on character generation. We did one on how you run a session zero, which is how do you sort of sit down and work out the ground rules for how the table's going to run, what sort of rules that you're going to use and which ones you're going to discard, that sort of stuff. And we did another show on the actual dice mechanics themselves. So we've kind of built up that. And we do a few fun little episodes as well, like the setting roulette that I mentioned before. But we do all of these little fun shows where we just talk about nothing really. But we try to sort of tie it into an element of the Genesis role-playing game.
I love it.
Not only that, we also do live plays as well. So, they're just hour-long episodes where we play the system. And we've got 2 seasons we've done of that. It's normally 5 to 6 episodes each where we play a setting.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I love that too, because you get to see not only the start of something, you actually get to see how a story is generated, how it goes through, how you interact with that story, and how a team... This is the great thing about role-playing in general, how a team resolves the problem that they're given.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the other thing as well that we developed the that we presented you can download it off the website, is an adventure design. It's just a one sheet. It seems pretty simple, but we've also got a bit of an article on our Facebook page as well as the website about it. Just a simple thing on how you can sit down and design a story about an hour before you actually start gameplay to nut out a few ideas and just run a session from there. So, all of these sorts of tools, and we do an episode wholly and solely dedicated to that. So you can learn how that system's run, and we develop a story live on the show.
That's brilliant. Now, one thing that's caught my attention is you've got a coming soon, which is, of course, this amazing... Well, the artwork straight away got me too. But Night's Edge, so an original Genesis setting that you guys are putting together. So please do tell.
What that is, basically, this is what we design on the setting roulette. The ideas that we initially came up with were werewolves, vampires, airships, and magic. A shattered world was another option that we had. So Night's Edge effectively is it was a solid planet at one stage where magic was, it's a typical D&D world, but the vampires enslaved the people and the elves, and the werewolves also enslaved people, and so there was this 100-year war that basically went on between the vampires and the werewolves. And eventually things just got a little bit strange, and the elves became corrupted and whatever else, and then the planet exploded. But it was held together partially by the magic. So the cities they floated from they were basically suspended. They had this magic going on. Magic is the answer to everything in all these settings. Or the Force, whichever way you want to look at it. So the cities rose above this inky black darkness that was left behind because obviously, vampires and werewolves like to live in the dark. So the cities rose above that. And where that is, where these cities rest just on the edge of that is called Night's Edge. And so that's where that idea came from. That's kind of the nutshell from, that's that setting in a nutshell. And it's very, very cool. We're still in the process because I'm as busy as all hell with writing and stuff like that. So it's a matter of, finding time. We don't do this full time as much as we'd love to. But there's plenty of other people who are putting settings together which are absolutely fantastic. It will be coming. It's just a matter of when.
I love the idea. It feels like the minute I sort of got the idea from what you've just been telling us about, the description of the world, it feels like it's a steampunk, dark fantasy version of Bespin.
Yes. Surprisingly, there is a character who is in there by the name of Octavius Magnuson, who runs this shadow port. And to say that I did my best version of Lando Calrissian would be, I give it a go. It wasn't very good. But,
that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Now, with Dicepool, obviously, one of the great things about it too is that people can interact with you guys. To hear that you also take on a lot of the questions and stuff like that on those episodes must mean that you get great interactivity with your listeners.
Look, we do, and I mean we're getting likes on Facebook because that's predominantly where we get most of our interaction with. But we also have a fairly vibrant community as well. That asks us as well as asks other people because, we don't have necessarily all the answers. We're really big into this, building that community to help each other. We have fairly strict guidelines how people conduct themselves and, they know that they're coming to a safe place and they can learn about the game. So there's been some really good ideas and people asking questions and other community members answering them well before we can get a chance to get onto them. It's really, really good to have that camaraderie, I guess, between all of the gamers, and to be all inclusive of both experienced gamers as well as people who've never had anything to do with role playing before.
Oh, definitely. I think it's fantastic. Now, it's interesting how you and I met too through a couple of mutual friends. Obviously, through Keith Capel, I was doing an interview with him earlier in the year, and he said, "Mate, I know this really good mate of mine over in Australia." And then at the same time, had no idea that she'd actually been very good pals with a certain Mr. Harris of my saga as well.
Indeed. I've known Adam, when he was working in the cinemas in Toombul, when it was up in the, it still is, I think. It's been a long time since I've been to Toombul, but when it was the old Birch Cunner on Coyle. And we sort of got friendly around about the time that episode 1 was coming out. Because we'd organised for a fairly large group booking for one of the screenings. And was actually working as a police officer down at the Toombul Police Beat at that stage. So we became quite good friends then, just stayed in touch all the way through. But Keith is just talking about Keith for a minute. He is kind of what I would consider to be my mentor. He's a very, very experienced writer and does some amazing work. I approached him at a place which is called Gamination Con in the States, where it's just a 4-day gaming convention, very, very small in Plano, Texas. It's on in April next year, just to give them a quick plug. Keith and I got talking there, and so we became good friends, and then got involved in his writing academy for people who want to get into role-playing design. That I did his course and applied to work for FFG during that period of time, and managed to be asked to come and participate, which was great, and work for them. And Keith and I, Keith's been my mentor during that process, so I can't speak more highly enough about him. He's just a great guy. And a very, very talented artist, that's for sure.
Oh, definitely. And may I say, it's another franchise, but he's completely, total Robotech nut.
I never realised that he was such a Robotech nut until recently.
Oh, really?
But no, he sort of keeps that very, very much under his belt. You open the flood doors, he's on. So
he loves it. He loves it. With I remember chatting to him off the air when we were doing the interview, and he just mentioned it's one of those things. And I think it's one of those things with that franchise is interesting. It came out at a time it was just right. Carl Masek, the guy that put those 3 separate anime, so the 3 separate shows, were in the same production company from Japan, from Tatsunoko, came over. And he'd worked for George in the marketing department on the first Star Wars film.
Oh, wow.
So he kind of went, George has done this with, he obviously watched what was happening. And then said, well, maybe I can do that with a mecha anime. And they were doing it with every one of them. So Go Lion obviously came out here as Voltron, and there's a number of different of those little animes that came out, and we had to relate them to the culture that we have out here. Or out in the States, obviously. And anyway, so that went the way it did, but it came out in 83 or 84 in the States, right on the heels of the classic trilogy, and same with us out here. And it has that feel. It's mortal heroes sacrificing themselves for the greater good.
Some interesting stories. I never really got into Robotech, I'll be perfectly honest. A friend of mine at school did. He was just absolutely crazy, and we talked a lot about it.
Yeah.
And he got really into Palladium as well. Just talking because he loved the Macro Saga specifically. I diverged a little bit, and I went into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because that was also in Palladium as well. So that's kind of where our interests parted. I know that Keith loves it, and my mate John loved it as well. So, it just wasn't my thing. But I mean, I have watched it, I've sat through it, and I thought it was great. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the live action version.
Well, the thing is, it's an interesting time. Harmony Gold, who obviously own that currently, have done a deal with, I think it's Sony that's doing the movie, if I remember right. What they're sort of looking at is that Tatsunoko is reverting all rights to Macross, and I think their other two titles in 2020 or 2021. So it means Harmony Gold won't be able to use those parts of Robotech anymore.
Right.
So even if it goes to Sony's going to have to shell out big money if they're going to do anything that resembles those anime. I think they're just going to have to go completely original, to be perfectly honest. It might be the way to go anyway.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah,
but it's an interesting, the thing is, that game itself, it wasn't about the robots for me. It wasn't about the mecha, It wasn't about these giant things. It was about the characters. But also, having said that, with the game itself, you wanted to be best buddies with the guy you were next to in the game. Because if they got obliterated and they're down to their little cockpit, they still had quite a bit of firepower if they ejected and then self-destructed the mecha they were in. The blast radius would wipe out whoever was next to them. And there's a number of times where one of our guys just would be bugging the rest of them up, and we'd be getting wasted by Zentradi. And a mate of mine, he said, "That's it, I'm out here, I've got to eject." And the other guy, this big fella, he always had the biggest mech. The one was like a destroyer, so it didn't move fast. It was like walking pace. The others all had those big jet fighter ones, so the Veritech fighters. Yeah. And he goes, "Oh, don't do it. I know what you're doing. You're ejecting, aren't you?" He said, "Yeah, mate. Well, I'm going to die. I've got to save my character." "Oh, no. You're going to self-destruct, aren't you?" Well, he said, "Yeah, it's the only way to take out the enemy. I told you to buy a Veritech fighter, mate." And then took off, blew up, and the blast radius wiped out his mech as well. So he says, people learnt to use Veritech fighters, not the old retired man, like with a walking stick. That's the sort of pace that these things did. So very funny how that sort of came around. But look, fun games. But I did play the Palladium Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game.
Great. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the thing which really sort of dragged me into it was when they had the Australian version of it. It was there was I can't remember what it was called, Terrace Australis or something like that.
I think so.
And it basically had, you can play echidnas and wombats and humanoid dingoes and and I've just got thanks very much, I'll take that. So I've been meaning to do that as a conversion for Genesis, but again, time is always against me. But yeah.
I tell you, well, it's always popular, and the fact that now, I don't know if it's DC that did it or which comic company it did, but they've just done a Batman and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles team up, which quite a good graphic novel from what I remember of it. But yeah, so the interest is definitely out there for a half decent Turtles RPG, without a doubt. I love it. So what can the listeners in the next couple of weeks look forward to on Dicepool podcast?
Well, next episode, we're basically going to be taking a fairly deep dive into the Terranoth setting, which is the official Fantasy Flight Games fantasy setting, I guess, the generic fantasy setting for the game. And then after that, I think we're going to be doing an episode specifically about vehicle combat and everything that entails. And we've done so much playtesting and whatever else for that side of things because it just does our head in a little bit. But, hopefully if people have experienced Genesis, they've had a good play with it and then have gone into the vehicle combat side of things and just gone, what were they thinking? Hopefully we'll be able to shed some light and, it's certainly not as hard as what a lot of people make it out to be. and we'll have some tips and tricks to be able to make that part of his setting because the guys, strangely enough, you should mention mechs and stuff like that. Flano and Huz are really big into BattleTech.
Oh, wow.
And they decided that they wanted to have a Genesis BattleTech game, so they've been hard at designing sort of rules, and so they've opened up looked under the engine as far as the mechanics of the vehicle combat goes. So we'll utilise that as a bit of an example. But that's for the next month or so, and then we'll probably have Christmas, obviously. But who knows what the new year will hold. But it's all looking fantastic from our end.
It certainly is exciting times. And again, it's great to get into the holidays because more people have time to play RPG, get involved, and particularly learning a new system. Why not use the school holidays to get in there and learn something new? And tell you what, while we're at it, with Fantasy Flight Games, folks, if you haven't done it yet, download the Dice app. Just download it. It is fantastic.
Yep. And all of the books for Genesis, not so much Star Wars, but definitely Genesis. So that means the Terranorth book as well as the Genesis core rule book is available on PDF as well from Drive-Thru RPG for next to nothing. So, give that a go because I know that a lot of people don't necessarily have the space these days to have big bookshelves. So, if it's just something that you want to read on your iPad or whatever device that you've got, you can just download and, look at the rules. And it's always kept up to date then as well with the revisions and everything like that. So definitely download it. It's good stuff.
Definitely. So where can the folks find your show and where can they get in touch with you, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram?
Okay, well, they just need to search at Dicepool Podcast. We missed out on that Dicepool Podcast. But they can just search at Dicepool Podcast. They can go to our website, as you mentioned before, which is thedicepoolpodcast.com. You can find us on iTunes just by searching at Dicepool Podcast. And we're also on another one that I can't remember, Podbean. That's the one that I remembered. So we're on there as well. So, any of your, I think we're on Google Play as well. So, we've sort of covered all of our platforms. And hopefully in the not too distant future we'll be on Spotify as well.
Awesome. I want to thank Ian for being on the show tonight, and Fantha Trackers, get out there, go and check it out and get involved. RPG is fun, it's social. Get off the social media and get social playing role-playing games.
Indeed. Thanks for having me, Adam.
No worries, it's an absolute pleasure. And that's the end of this episode here on the show. And I want to thank Ian for being on the show, and also to all of you for listening. And hopefully you've learnt a little bit about Fantasy Flight Games, role-playing games, and of course about the new Genesis role-playing game, which I think is very exciting. And of course, it's just like Star Wars. That's right. So go and check it out. You can check out all the latest episodes of The Fantha from Down Under, and of course our other podcast here on the channel. That is, of course, Making Tracks with Mark Newbold and Dave Tree, live from the UK on Tuesdays on Fantha Tracks Radio. You can also catch me every Saturday and every second Saturday on some months, depends on how busy we are, on, of course, Fantha Tracks Radio. You can find it on iTunes. You can also find it on SoundCloud and wherever you find good podcasts. Simple as that. Leave a review up there if you've enjoyed the show, or give us some feedback about what you'd like to see on the show, or new Star Wars content you'd like us to chat about. But also, if you're loving it, leave a 5-star review. Why not? I'm Adam O'Brien. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll catch you next time on The Fantha from Down Under. May the Force be with you.